So welcome, everybody. Thank you for sharing all of these beautiful things that you are grateful for. Oh, her husband fixed her flat tire. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start presentation here. And so tonight you are here to learn about this topic that you may have heard about called ecotherapy. And I'm going to lead you in that, as well as Carolyn Schuyler. I'm the Senior Watershed Restoration Manager with the James River Association, and Carolyn will be talking to you in a minute after I give a little intro, and she can tell you a little bit about herself and Wildrock. So let's start off so we all know what we're talking about. What is ecotherapy? And I will start off that people say it's an emerging field, but it's also something that is very old too. Humans' connections with nature and the landscape is an ancient thing, really. And you probably had connections to it as a child, and it came really naturally. So ecotherapy, it's kind of the combination of these two words, eco, and of course, what do you think of when you think eco? You think environment, nature, habitat. And then the therapy piece, what do you think of with that? It's around the treatment of disorders. It could be that, or some type of curative power or quality. But it's also things that are less clinical, like an act or hobby, a task, a different thing that you work on that really relieves tension. So it's a wide range of things. And that also follows through with the field of ecotherapy. I'll talk a little bit about my background in a minute, but I come from the non-clinical side and doing restoration work, but I can incorporate this into my work. Carolyn, on the other hand, does come somewhat from the clinical side. So sometimes it could range, really. And these pictures sort of give you a feeling of that. Sometimes it might be a solo activity that you do on your own that you know makes you feel connected and you can get outside. It could be with a group of people. It could be even indoors. You see that photo there as a group that I work with here that can't go outside. And so how do you bring nature to them in the form of that's flowers where we made bouquets with them. So it ranges is the point I just wanted to make there. And it's not one size fits all. A little bit about me, again, that childhood thing. This is not the greatest picture, but I grew up in Powhatan County, and this is the little patch of woods behind my parents' home, and that tiny little creek where my connection to nature and my love for the woods and our waters really began. Again, coming at it from different perspectives, my background is landscape architecture, and that's really about connection to place. And the person who founded that was Frederick Law Olmsted, and he actually had a background in health and sanitary things. So he got it and created Central Park, places like that, to connect people in the city to these natural spaces. And that down there is a quote from him, which again, I think, like I said, ecotherapy isn't necessarily a new field. He said, the enjoyment of scenery employs the mind without fatigue and yet exercises it, tranquilizes it and yet enlivens it. And thus, through the influence of the mind over the body, gives the effect of refreshing rest and reinvigoration to the whole system. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of what I went to school for. And my job at JRA, I lead our restoration programs. And so that's everything from planting trees to cleaning up trash to removing invasive plant species. And you might wonder what ecotherapy has to do with that, but I think it's very connected. And this idea of going to nature for healing, we have to remember that it's still, you don't want to just take again, right? This kind of give and take relationship with the natural world, and not just going out there for your own healing, but thinking about how you can give back to it in return so that both of you, both you and your natural surroundings are benefiting. So I try to incorporate that into my work and encourage stewardship of our natural spaces. That's actually from Wildrock, Carolyn, in case you recognize some of those trees were that kid. Another, just giving you some little nuggets of how I got into this and names and people that inspired me. So while I was leading restoration projects at JRA, I also really loved circles of people getting together and asking those big questions together and listening to each other and hearing what we're going through. And when I was doing these circles at my home, I found out about this woman, Joanna Macy, and I'd highly recommend her books. She has this concept that she calls the work that reconnects. And a lot of it for her is around understanding a lot of the threats to our natural world and creating practices for people to really connect to that and feel it and understand it and find their role in healing our land and our water. And the cycle is what she kind of goes through. And we did this today, as you might have noted, starting with gratitude. And these are quotes from her website over here on the right. So practices that start from gratitude, that really quiets your mind, helps you be more fully present, and really opens that space to be able to move forward. And then the second piece of that, and she has practices that you can do in each of these phases, is honoring our pain. So daring to experience it, we learn the true meaning of compassion, to suffer with. And we begin to know the immensity of kind of that relationship between heart and mind. And then the third is seeing with new eyes. So practices that help you connect to nature in a new way or to other people in a new way, that you can sense how connected and interrelated we all are, and begin to see how you can lead to the fourth one, which is going forth. What type of actions can you take that fit your own situation or your own gifts or your own interests? So she was really, really interesting person I would encourage you to look through. And some of you on the call may be interested in knowing how to get more into the ecotherapy. And I just wanted to throw this out there. The Earth Body Institute is who I did my training through. Some of the level 1 was online, and then level 2 was a more immersive experience in Madison, Virginia, where it was a week long, and we learned different practices and got to meet amazing people that week. And then what does ecotherapy look like at JRA? I was leading these. I haven't because of COVID, but I was leading these James River RX sessions, and what they look like. Whoops, sorry, I was about to admit someone. They were usually an hour long and different practices each time, but we would meet somewhere in the James River Park system because I live in Richmond, starting with some kind of grounding exercise, checking in with the group, some kind of deepening materials, I call it, something to really connect to nature. And then the fourth, integrating that, which could be journaling, it could be sharing it with another person, it could be drawing, and then having a closing. And that little poem there in the middle is one that was created by one of the practices that we did with a group. It was called Poetry, and we had groups split up, and they got to pick whatever tree in the park, and they hung out there, and each of them wrote all of these things about the tree, and then got together, put their words together into a poem that kind of reflected that tree. And it was really cool experience, and that was one of the poems from that. And then I'm gonna think the next one is I'm gonna pass it over to Carolyn, who is going to lead us on our next session.
So my background is actually in the field of mental health. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I started my career actually focused on children and families, providing play therapy to support families that had experienced traumatic events like a medical problem or a natural disaster or an abuse history. And I learned right away that nature had a profound effect on helping families to stay connected in hard times and to find a sense of meaning and a sense of something larger than themselves when they needed that emotional support. And I imagine a lot of you relate to that. There's something intrinsic about the natural world that helps us to access our own resources for healing. And we lead groups with children at Wildrock, both on site at our nonprofit Nature Playscape and Discovery Center in Northwest Albemarle County, but we also go into urban green spaces to work with children. So these pictures here you see are, one is actually at a school. There's a wonderful trail behind one of our local city elementary schools on that first image. And the other is just a urban park that's on the Rivanna River. And we find that in these spaces that when children are given the sense of permission to follow their own sense of curiosity, that they begin to work on their emotional issues just spontaneously, that they start to find a sense of mastery and release by using found materials and by connecting with each other in these spaces. So we find that there's something almost magical about bringing children into a space and giving them the freedom to navigate it how they choose to. We had a group of, this is a group of 6th graders from a local elementary school that spent a day at Wildrock, and just the sense of freedom that they had resulted in such a spontaneous expression of joy at the end. When we asked them about their experience, a lot of them told us that it was the happiest day they had had in a really long time, that they had so missed the joy of just being able to play and explore now that they were middle schoolers and had more pressures. And we hear this again and again, that there's a tremendous sense of relief for, I think, our time-pressured and screen-focused youth and adults as well, to be able to be given a window and a space that is wide open for exploration. And so in a sense, I think of nature as being a co-therapist, that it's naturally therapeutic. We have lots of research now to tell us that the rich sensory inputs of nature have a calming effect on our nervous systems and help us to enter states of relaxation and to exit out of rumination, which can sometimes lead to anxiety and depression. So when we create these warm and nurturing centers and give people the support to go and explore, good things just start to happen on their own without a lot of effort. So you can go forward. Some of you may look at these pictures and I'm going to guess it may bring back memories from your own childhoods of when you were able to follow your own interests, to build forts or play in streams or come up with great stories of yourself as a hero or a heroine. This is such an intrinsic part of being a child. And anyone I know that was fortunate enough to be able to have a childhood in this kind of freedom with the natural world speaks very highly of what that experience has done for them in their adult life. There's a knowing that having those early childhood experiences in nature full of joy and free expression has an effect for life, for the rest of life. It provides a bedrock of resilience that people can return to. So knowing that, I know that from my own experience, because I did have an opportunity to grow up in a nature-rich area, and I was given a lot of freedom to explore and play. And I consider that one of the greatest blessings of my childhood that has allowed me to have a happy adulthood and to be able to seek out healing resources when I need it. And because of that, I decided about 5 or 6 years ago that I was going to step out of my work as a traditional psychotherapist in an office and begin to work more in the natural world, because I was very concerned that seeing that so many children were not getting these kinds of experiences and wondering what that would mean for their development in the long term, with them not having that sense of resilience that comes from a deep personal connection to the natural world. So that led to the work to start Wildrock and to do work throughout the community to try to give more access to children for these kinds of experiences. You can go to the next slide, Amber. So we need these experiences now more than ever. As you probably know, you've probably seen in the paper or heard on the news that we are in the midst of a mental health crisis in this country. Rates of depression and anxiety are at an all-time high because of pandemic stress. The pandemic affects us all differently, but it's fair to say that all of us have added layers of stress in our lives because of the pandemic. And now more than ever, we really need to be able to find places that help us to recover from stress. And nature has that ability to help the nervous system overcome the cost of chronic stress. So the work that Amber is doing and a lot of organizations, and I'm sure some of you are doing, to support people in making these spaces is actually part of community mental health and public health, because it is so powerful in helping to buffer against the effects of stress that are particularly high right now with the pandemic. Go forward. So Wildrock is located in Crozet, Virginia, which is northwest Albemarle County in the Blue Ridge foothills. And the whole purpose of our nonprofit is to provide a really nurturing and welcoming space for people to find their own nature connection through play. And we work with all ages, primarily children, but also all the way up to senior citizens, because the truth is playfulness is not something that really only belongs to children. We all need it. And nature has a way of inspiring playfulness at all ages, whether that's taking pictures or creating art out of found natural objects, telling stories. There's so many different avenues for us to find playfulness in nature. And it's such a natural fit to discover that kind of creativity and joy when we allow ourselves to immerse ourselves in a beautiful natural space. And we particularly need this kind of place now because children just don't have muddy feet the way they used to. The average child today is spending 7 hours in front of an electronic device and only several minutes outside in free play. So there's a dire need to create opportunities to help people to connect and discover what nature can do for emotional well-being. Too many children have not had the lived experience to know how nature can be an ally and an important part of self-care. So we want to try to make sure that more and more children are finding out at a young age that they do belong in nature and that nature is a friend that they can build a relationship with and return to again and again throughout their life. So one of our philosophies at Wildrock is to scaffold nature connection by having enticing elements that help children tap into that playfulness I was discussing earlier. So for example, we have this large oak salamander that celebrates the biodiversity of salamanders that's in our area. And you can just see the spontaneous joy that comes for children when they're in expansive spaces like this and have the chance to make up their own stories.
So we're going to head into, let's see, hopefully my screen's still sharing okay. It's hard to do both things. Hopefully I'm doing okay over here. And you can see everything. So we're going to, right now, just, we're not going into breakout rooms yet, but if you were able to collect an object today or a couple days ago, or if you have something just around you, that's fine too. If you have a plant near you or anything. I want you to just spend some time with it for a couple minutes. We're gonna journal for about 3 minutes or so. But spend some time with it, feel it, look at it, smell it, do whatever you want to kind of really engage all your senses with it. And just write about what you notice. What do you notice about the object? It could be anything. And also take note of what thoughts might be coming up for you when you are engaging with that object. And then possibly for some of you it might not, but is there something that's coming to you that it's conveying for you specifically this evening? Maybe it's about something that you're realizing that you're really interested in knowing more about, and this winter would be a great time to dive into it. Or maybe it's a message that the fall and all of the leaves falling off the trees kind of remind us that it's a good time to let go of some things. So maybe it's conveying something around that or something totally different. So I'm going to, let me see what time it is here, 6:55. I'm like right on time and I'm really shocked how good on time we're doing. So I'm going to set my little timer for maybe 4 minutes to give you a minute to experience it, and then just journal silently. So as you come back, if you would like to, just use the chat box to enter just like one word, or it could be a couple words if you want, that captures some kind of inspiration from your little item that you had. So I'm going to, mine is not going to make any sense to anyone else but me. I'll just read some of these as people type them in. Oh. So some of the words that are popping in here are grounding, connecting, love meeting new people who appreciate nature. Yes. Yep. Simple pleasures. Life has different cycles or phases. New beginnings. Curiosity. Nourish. Change is okay. Figs. Yum. I added a word. Potential energy. Depth. Preserved. These are wonderful. And so, you know, you give people this one assignment to do, and it amazes me every time. People can go to the same place, even the same patch of woods, all collect different items, and the words would be totally different. Preserved, aromatic, filling me with joy, catching and letting go, shed old golds, thought patterns, and be willing to start fresh. Hi, Lois. I don't get to see you. I miss you, Lois. Sorry. Creative, bloom where you are. Sorry if this is taking a while. I enjoy reading through them and sharing them with everybody. Connection to changing seasons, breathing, and safety. So thank you so much for sharing those. Those are beautiful inspirations that came in such a small amount of time. That is another thing that always surprises me, is that you can go for a short 5-minute walk, and if you go out with intention and are really into connecting, it doesn't take long to to catch these little nuggets of inspiration. So, all right, let me go to the next one here. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Carolyn to talk a little bit about, so we're talking about what is ecotherapy. We did a little breakout exercise of our own, and she's going to talk to us about what a practice could mean for you and what you need to be thinking about if you want to create this in your own life, so we can make it through 2020 in one piece here. So Carolyn, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Amber. So I think we're all familiar with the idea of self-care, of doing practices on a daily basis that contribute to our well-being. And a lot of us will think about that in terms of nutrition or exercise or connecting with loved ones. And we now have the evidence that nature connection should really be in the mix, because people that have a strong emotional connection to the natural world that is cultivated by spending time in nature have higher rates of happiness. This has been established in study after study over the last 30 years. So it really is a factor of resilience or a social determinant of health to have a relationship with nature. It's not a luxury. It's actually an essential part of being a healthy person, because we are part of nature and we need to be able to feel that in our body on a regular basis. So this pyramid that I have here probably reminds you of the classic food pyramid that we all saw when we were kids growing up in health class, that encouraged us to eat lots of fruits and vegetables on the bottom and not so many desserts on the top. So this is a deliberately designed to look like the food pyramid. It was developed by some professors at University of Virginia, Tim Beattie being one of them. And it's meant to give you an idea about the dosages and the duration of nature immersion that contributes to people's well-being. And you can see on the bottom, it's the daily connection that we really want to be getting as much as we can. And to see that, that nature connection does not always have to mean going to a remote park. It can be looking at a green wall across from you in an urban setting. It can be listening to birds. It can be finding whatever park space is within walking distance. All of those experiences can have a cumulative effect. We now know that 120 minutes a week is a threshold number of minutes to start getting significant health benefits. So this pyramid suggests that we want to be having daily contact, but also weekly getting out into regional areas where there's less development and more green space to enjoy. And as we go up the pyramid, it's suggesting that you get further out into more remote areas, to the very top being going away for an extensive period without contact with your screen and the usual pressures of modern life. So, you know, the top peak is not something that all of us can achieve, obviously. But the good news is you don't need to go all the way to the top to have a rich, beneficial relationship to the natural world. You can be on the bottom tier your whole life and have a rich and purposeful and health-giving relationship with the natural world. And a lot of this is just the intention. Amber used the words intention, that we know that intentional activities are 40% of what contribute to people's wellness. That's been determined by the field of positive psychology, that is the number. 40% of our life happiness comes from the choices we make about the behaviors we do every day. So part of the practice of ecotherapy is experimenting and finding what are the practices that are going to help you build that relationship with the natural world that can be so supportive of you. And one of the hallmarks that I really appreciate about ecotherapy is the idea of having a reciprocal relationship with the natural world, which Amber spoke about in the beginning, and why her job is such a beautiful fit, because she's constantly in a reciprocal connection with nature, caring for it. And while she's caring for it, she's getting the benefits of that space. And you can have a reciprocal relationship even if you're not in a position to be planting trees or cleaning up garbage or doing assessments of stream buffers. It can be as small as having a sense of gratitude when you're in a space, or reflecting on the meaning of that space for the community. Noticing the value of spaces is a good place to start, and starting to look more closely at the green spaces that are around you. And if you begin there, some things are going to just start to happen. You're going to add on to that over time. your relationship will deeper. It's just like when you're making a new friendship. In the beginning, you might just talk about the weather, but as time goes on, you're talking about your childhood memories and your dreams for the future. A relationship with nature deepens over time with our deliberate returning and desire to deepen our awareness and our contribution. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And I'm just going to give you a couple. These are classic ecotherapy practices that are available to all of us, no matter where we are, what our physical abilities are. We can all find what's called a sit spot. And it's just what it sounds like. It's finding a spot that you will feel you can return to again and again. So you want to choose a sit spot that really is practical to you, that you know you can get there on a regular basis. Because like I said, if you want to develop a relationship with nature, it's like developing a relationship with a person. You need to have some consistent contact to get to know the natural world. So going to the same place again and again can be quite profound. And those of you that have special spaces already know this, that it develops a level of appreciation and intimacy and almost longing when you're not able to go back. That can be very sustaining and comforting, the way a good friend can be comforting. So if you don't already have a spot that you can identify as a special place that you want to get to know through the season, that you want to observe on a deeper level, this would be a really great place to start. And if getting outside is difficult for you, it may be the favorite window in wherever you're living right now. And you can have a sit spot just looking at the sky. The sky is fascinating and it's always changing. So there is nature always everywhere, because it's, we're on the earth, so we can find it no matter where we are. So I would encourage you tonight to think about, what is my sit spot? Do I already have one and I just haven't been naming it that? Or is it time for me to get more deliberate about finding one? So we can go to the next slide, Amber. And another thought is to open up that playfulness and connection. This was an installation we did at the University of Virginia on one of the lawns there. And all we did was set out some natural materials in baskets and make a ring of little pieces of grass and leaves. And that's all we did. There was no instructions, just that. And people seemed to spontaneously know what to do. They were picking up the natural objects and creating a mandala on the earth. So these are the kinds of things that you can do with loved ones. You can do yourself. And it will awaken a creativity that you may not have felt since you were a little kid. And I can guarantee that you're more artistic than you ever imagined. And nature art supplies are the best art supplies, because no matter what you do with them, it's going to be beautiful. And that's just true. You can't mess up when you're using nature. So it can take out all that performance anxiety that some of us have had drilled into us. So you just get the stuff and start moving it around and see what you can create. And this is a deep way to connect to nature as well. Go to the next slide. And I want to also speak that there's actually research on what's called indoor nature experiences. This is a real thing that's been studied. And the good news is that we can get benefits even having natural objects that aren't alive in our spaces. Plants are certainly great, but so are objects that have meaning for us, like the objects that you just shared in your small groups. They're rich metaphors for so many different messages that we may need at different points in our life. And I think having a display like this someplace in your home that you can look at will help you in fostering that relationship to the natural world that's so important.
Thanks, Carolyn. The mandalas are one of my favorite things to do. It's my go-to if I'm outside. Anywhere that I am. So continuing that reciprocal idea, and I think this is one of our last slides here, is thinking about what does gratitude and action look like for you? And these are just some ideas, and Carolyn already touched on a lot of these things. It looks different for everybody. So a plug for some volunteer activities we have coming up. We're going to be planting I think over 1,400 trees this fall. So you can come plant some baby trees. That's one. But you could just clean up trash in your neighborhood on the next time you take a walk. You could introduce a friend or a family member to nature by taking them on a hike. It might not look like action oriented, but you could offer, just a silent thank you to your favorite place. It could be as simple as that. Be a voice for your local waterways. Hug that tree, take it that far. There's nothing like hugging a tree. And really just finding your own genuine way to give back. And this question at the bottom is something that just to put in the chat box there if you want. What is one way that you maybe currently show gratitude for natural spaces, or maybe one way that you could show gratitude? And just put those in the chat box. Let me see if I can share and look at the chat box at the same time. Oh, thanks, Erin, for giving a shout out to the planting tree volunteers. So I see Teresa says sharing her favorite trails with friends. Carolyn, planting native plants. Someone put in a rain garden. Sharing nature photography. Volunteers at the state park. Removing invasives. Taking photos and writing poems. Let's see, Virginia Master Naturalists. Thank you all. You're some of the best volunteers out there. Helping animals, honor those who lived here. I think that is a key point as well. Education, clean up the Bay Day. Everett mentions his daughter and him go walking or kayaking around waterways, picking up trash. These are all great examples. And as you see, it's not, there's so many different ways. It's not the same for everybody. Planting insect-friendly plants in the garden. And work on the invasive species task force and take and share pictures. These are wonderful. So we're about to head into a few minutes for questions. But before we do that, we are going to take a moment again, because this might be the only hour away from craziness today. And Carolyn is going to lead us on a little meditation for, let's see, we want to save some minutes for questions. What do you think, about like 2 minutes or so, Carolyn? What were you thinking?
This can be very brief. So
Great.
I just want to say that we have a deep understanding now that bringing to mind images of the natural world can be as powerful as actually being in nature. And this is because your body really doesn't know the difference between what it imagines and what it's actually experiencing, which you guys probably know if you've ever started to think about what you're going to make for dinner and you notice that you're salivating because you're starting to think about food. So your body has a physiological response. So your body will have a physiological response to you bringing to mind special spaces in nature. So and this can be very brief, like what we're going to do now. So what I would actually like you to do is just, if it's helpful to you, to shut your eyes or just have a soft gaze somewhere in the room, just to invite yourself to bring to mind a space that is just a treasure to you. And it could be a space that you've been to before and returned to again and again, or it could be a space that you're imagining for the first time now. And as you allow yourself to enter this space, the only thing that you need to do is just make yourself comfortable. Find some way to be in this space that your body can begin to really relax and take in all the smells, the colors, and the textures that are so pleasing to you. And to notice the deep welcome that's here for you. And you may notice a spontaneous need to take in a big breath through your nose and a long letting go exhale. And this space is your reminder that nature is your home. And you can carry it with you at all times in your imagination. Okay, so when you're ready, you can bring your awareness back to the room.
Thank you, Carolyn. Short and sweet.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
So we have a few minutes for questions. It can be about anything. It could be about like literally anything. So I don't know, Erin, if any have come yet, but you're welcome to put them in the chat box, or I don't know how many people are on here now. That's probably the easiest.
We haven't had any questions except for, can we get the slide deck?
Yes, so while you're thinking of questions to ask, we did record and we will be sharing it on our, we have a home site that we'll send out after this where we post all of our webinars. And yes, I can save the slide deck as a PDF and send that out to folks as well. Give me a minute to. Yeah, so as thoughts come in, you can type questions, or if you want to type in here, what was I just thinking? Maybe like what was most, it's going to be, actually, I'll use this time to talk about this. We're going to be sending out an email after about just to get your thoughts on this, and we're providing all of the resources for you. And we're also going to have a survey in there. So I mentioned that I was leading James River RX sessions, and Wildrock, of course, has been doing things too. So we have a survey just to get a feel for how we can best support you right now, understanding that some people might not be comfortable in groups outside, some might be, some might want some virtual experiences to connect with other people that are also nature lovers and have this relationship with nature. So I encourage you to fill out that survey. We'll also include a link in the chat box in case in case you're not an email checker. But we would love your input. Seriously, we will use it to try to make sure that we're providing that support for you all. So let me see. I think
Amber, we've had several questions.
Great. I figured if I talked long enough, somebody would ask something.
So the first is from Kathy. Where are your favorite hiking trails that are less populated?
We told you they would be too populated. I'm just kidding. I don't know where you live, Kathy. Where are you at, Kathy? Where do you live? Not your street address, but are you in Richmond or?
Williamsburg.
Oh, I'm not as good with Williamsburg. You know what, though? You're in Williamsburg. You should check out, she's not on the call, but Dorothy, Ibis, William, and Mary have a great green space. I'm going to get it wrong. We should send that out.
Oh, right. It's the Parks RX, the park. I'm writing a book with Dorothy. It's Parks. If you go to William and Mary's website and look for Parks RX, the Park Lab, they have a great resource for finding trails.
Yep.
So that's great. I see there was a question about Wildrock. Is it a place for families or is it just for groups? It is actually for families. We do run field trips, but we also have days just open to the public, and we are actually welcoming people on timed visits right now, and we're open on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, and you can visit us at www.wildrock.org.
Thanks, Carolyn. Amber from Vicky, where are we planting trees?
Is that Vicky? My friend Vicky? I'm sorry you haven't. So we're planting trees in Fluvanna, Albemarle, and Nelson counties is where the tree plantings are this year on different private properties.
And from Drew, what project do you have coming up that you are most looking forward to? I think this is probably for both of you.
I just mentioned that I'm writing a book with a professor at the College of William and Mary, and we've designated December as the month that we're really going to finish it. So I'm looking forward to that. And it's actually going to be about self-guided trails for nature therapy.
That's great.
I don't have a good answer to that, except for I can't wait to read the survey because I love nature and I love connecting groups of people. And so I've missed connection with people over these crazy COVID times. So I'm looking forward to reading the survey and trying to come up with something to do with all of you wonderful people. And I know it's 7:29. If you have to hop off at 7:30, go for it. I'm willing to stick around for a few minutes after to help answer some of the questions. And if we don't get to all of them, we'll try to get to you.
There's a few more. The next one ties into what you were just saying, Amber, about the survey. It's from Beth Ann, and it's self-guided experiences are a go-to right now. How do we create the tangible / hands-on and engaging activities during these times?
That's actually what the book is about that I'm writing. I mean, I think a lot of it, can I just ask you, Beth Ann, are you running a park? Are you?
I work at Lewis Skinner. Hi, Carolyn. I actually, you spoke to our group last December. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the main thing is just thinking about, that concept of scaffolding, right? To think about what is it that people have some familiarity with that helps them to feel an entryway into a space. Sometimes it's as simple as just having a bench, right, in a strategic space, and then having some kind of a laminated card there that has a prompt. I mean, it can be that simple. I think it's just trying to get back to the basics of what do we know is going to signal to someone that this is a place that's okay for them to be, and then what can we have in that space that's going to invite them to engage with it in a deeper way. And you can be so creative with that. Like, Wildrock has done everything from, we have right now something called Unlock the Box, where people find words on the trail. And then when they put the words together, it's a sentence that unlocks a box that has a lot of interesting things in it. I mean, it's a very easy thing to do, but it gets people excited. So, I mean, it's really unleashing your creativity to figure out how you help people to engage.
Thank you so much.
Sure. It's good to see you.
And then Andrea has asked, are there best practices or guidelines for agencies wanting to begin ecotherapy style programming?
I would say definitely yes. One of the things that Amber and I talked about is I think you have to be really careful about your scope of practice to make clear what you mean when you're saying ecotherapy, because as Amber mentioned, it can mean a lot of different things. And you don't want to imply that you're providing therapy when that's not really what you're doing. So you just need to be really clear with folks what you're advertising and what they can expect and what you can and cannot do. And that's a starting point. And I think, it's worth it taking a class or having someone with experience in this to consult with you, but not to be intimidated. Because as Amber was saying, this is not only for people with advanced degrees. This is really about finding the right avenue to connect with nature and help others to do so in a way that's responsible.
Yep, I don't have much to add to that. I would encourage the class, even just like the level, like just one class. And I'd have to look back at our information. We had different stuff that was shared to us during that training that I don't know what we can share and what can't share, but there's great guidelines on how you guide a group and things like that.
And there are many, the class that Amber mentioned is just one. There are actually many places across the country now that are training. I have helped people. There's lots of different ways to get started on this.
Yep.
That's great, thank you. And Carolyn, I think just one last question. Did you mention when the book will be coming out that you're doing?
Well, maybe if I say it, it'll actually happen. The goal is to finish it this December. So we're hoping early next year. And if you're interested in that and would like to follow it, just email me at info@wildrock.org and I'll add you to our list so that you'll know about it when it's coming out. It's meant to be a very practical guide for anybody to start thinking about how to make green spaces more accessible for therapeutic work.
Great. I think that's all the questions I see. So I'm going to, for those still on here, I always like to end things with a poem. I don't know why. It's just something that I like to do. So it's a short one. I see you, Lois. I know, I can't help it. This one is, if you haven't heard of Mary Oliver, she's a wonderful poet that I would highly encourage you to look into if you're into this sort of thing. And this is one called Song for Autumn. Don't you imagine the leaves dream now? How comfortable it will be to touch the earth instead of the nothingness of the air and the endless freshets of wind. And don't you think the trees, especially those with mossy hollows, are beginning to look for the birds that will come, 6 a dozen, to sleep inside their bodies? And don't you hear the goldenrod whispering goodbye, the everlasting being crowned with the first tuffets of snow? The pond stiffens and the white field over which the fox runs so quickly brings out its long blue shadows. The wind wags its many tails, and in the evening, the piled firewood shifts a little, longing to be on its way. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Hopefully it was meaningful to you, and I thank you all for sharing all your great feedback along the way.
Thank you, everybody. We so enjoyed connecting with you tonight.